The year is 1817. America is young. It is a nation built on raw courage and untamed land. In the quiet green hills of Robertson County, Tennessee, a new chapter of American horror was about to be written. This wasn't a story of war or revolution. This was something darker, something that came from beyond the veil. The soil itself seemed to hold ancient secrets. The trees whispered tales older than the nation. People were carving out a life here. They were pioneers, but they were not alone. Something was waiting in the shadows, something ancient and malevolent. We are talking about the Bell family. John Bell was a respected farmer. He had a wife, Lucy, and several children. They lived on a large farm near the Red River in a small community that would later be known as Adams, Tennessee. They were hard-working people. They were church-going people. They believed in God and the simple truths of the frontier. But their faith was about to be tested. It was about to be shattered by a force they could not comprehend. This entity would become a legend whispered in fear around campfires for generations, a legend known as the Bell Witch. The early 19th century was a time of deep superstition. People believed in spirits, curses, and omens. The world was a mysterious place, filled with things that science couldn't explain. Flickering candlelight cast long, dancing shadows. The night was filled with the sounds of the wilderness. It was easy to imagine that things were watching from just beyond the firelight. For the Bell family, this imagination would become a terrifying reality. The line between their world and the spirit world was about to be torn open, and what came through was pure, unfiltered evil. This is not just a ghost story, this is a documented case of a haunting. It is one of the most famous paranormal cases in American history. It is a story of a family terrorized, a story of physical attacks, disembodied voices, and unexplained phenomena. We want to understand what happened in that small log cabin. We want to connect with the energy that still lingers there. We are going back in time. We are stepping into the darkness of the Bell Witch Cave and the land where it all began. We seek answers. We seek the truth behind America's greatest haunting. It all started subtly, as these things often do. John Bell was inspecting his cornfield one evening. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He saw a strange animal in the corn rows. It had the body of a dog but the head of a rabbit. It stared at him with unnatural eyes. John raised his gun and fired. The creature vanished into thin air. He was shaken. He was a man of the earth. He knew the animals of this land. This was something else. This was an omen, a warning of the darkness that was about to descend upon his home. Soon after, the strange occurrences moved inside the house. The family would hear knocking sounds on the outside walls of their log cabin. It was a rhythmic, insistent banging. It moved around the house as if something was circling them. John and his sons would rush outside, guns in hand, but there was never anyone there. The yard was empty. The night was still. The only sound was the chirping of crickets. The knocking would start again as soon as they were back inside. It was a game, a terrifying game played by an unseen tormentor. The family was on edge, their nerves fraying with each passing night. The sounds began to escalate. They were no longer just on the outside. Now they were inside the house. The family would hear the sound of a dog fighting. They would hear chains being dragged across the wooden floors. They would hear rats gnawing on the bedposts, even when there were no rats to be found. It was a symphony of terror conducted by an invisible hand. The sounds were designed to create fear, to break their spirits. The comfort of their own home was being stripped away. It was becoming a prison of sound and fear. There was no escape. The children were the first to experience the physical activity. Their blankets would be violently ripped from their beds in the middle of the night. They would be pulled by an unseen force. Their hair would be pulled. They would cry out in the darkness, but their parents were helpless. How do you fight something you cannot see? How do you protect your children from a phantom attacker? The Bell family was isolated. They were alone with this entity, and it was just getting started. The true horror had not yet revealed its name. The disembodied sound soon found a voice. It started as a faint whisper. It was weak, like an old woman breathing her last words. The family would hear it in the quiet moments of the day. They couldn't make out what it was saying. It was just a chilling, ethereal sound that seemed to come from the very walls of the house. The whispers grew stronger day by day. They became clearer. The voice would sing hymns, but the words were often twisted and wrong. It would recite Bible verses, then follow them with curses and profanity. It was mocking their faith. It was trying to break them spiritually. The entity finally gave itself a name. It called itself Kate. It claimed to be the spirit of a woman named Kate Batts. She was a neighbor of the Bells with whom John had a bad business deal over some land and slaves. The spirit claimed it was here for revenge. It wanted to kill John Bell, and it wanted to torment his family. The voice of Kate was everywhere. It could be a loud, booming voice that shook the rafters, or it could be a soft, sweet voice that whispered secrets in your ear. It knew things. It knew the family's deepest secrets, things no one outside the family could possibly know. Kate's voice was a constant presence. It would join in on family conversations. It would interrupt them with insults and laughter. It would predict future events. Sometimes it would be pleasant, having intelligent conversations with visitors who came to witness the phenomenon, but its mood could turn in an instant. The spirit was volatile. It was unpredictable. This psychological torment was relentless. Imagine living in a house where a disembodied voice constantly criticizes you, threatens you, and reveals your every hidden thought. The Bell family was living in a nightmare with no end in sight. The entity's focus was brutal and specific. It hated John Bell and his youngest daughter Betsy. It called John Old Jack and promised over and over that it would be the death of him. For Betsy, the torment was physical and cruel. Kate would slap her, pinch her, and stick her with pins. Betsy would faint and suffer from strange seizures. The spirit seemed jealous of Betsy's engagement to a local man named Joshua Gardner. Kate was determined to break them up. The entity was not just a ghost. It was an intelligent, manipulative, and deeply malevolent force with a clear agenda. The Bell farmhouse became a stage for paranormal chaos. Objects would fly across the room with incredible force. Plates and silverware would launch themselves from the dinner table, shattering against the walls. Furniture would be overturned by an invisible power. The family would watch in terror as chairs levitated off the floor and crashed back down. It was as if a poltergeist had been unleashed, a whirlwind of destructive energy tearing through their home. They would try to hold objects down, but the force was too strong. They were powerless against this invisible siege. The atmospheric tension inside the log cabin was unbearable. The air was always thick and heavy, charged with a negative energy you could feel on your skin. The flickering light from lanterns and candles would cast long, monstrous shadows that seemed to move on their own. The old wood of the cabin would creak and groan as if the house itself was in pain. Every sound, every gust of wind, every shadow made them jump. They were living in a constant state of high alert. Their home, once a place of safety and warmth, was now a source of unending dread and anxiety. We can almost picture it like watching a piece of old grainy footage. The rough-hewn log walls, the simple wooden furniture, the pale faces of the family huddled together. You can see the fear in their eyes as a candlestick lifts from the mantelpiece and hovers in mid-air before being hurled into the hearth. You can hear the sharp intake of breath as a disembodied cackle echoes through the small room. This wasn't just a few bumps in the night. This was a full-scale paranormal assault, a war being waged against a family by an entity from another dimension. The physical attacks were not limited to objects. The entity, Kate, would physically assault the family members. They would feel slaps from an unseen hand, leaving red welts on their skin. Their hair would be pulled with such force that clumps would come out. John Bell suffered the worst of it. He began to experience strange afflictions. His face and tongue would swell, making it difficult to speak or swallow. He would have violent fits and seizures. Kate would gloat and laugh during these attacks, her voice ringing out in triumph as John Bell lay helpless on the floor. The entity known as Kate was a master of psychological warfare. It really seemed to feed on the fear and despair of the Bell family. You know, it wasn't just about making noise or throwing things. It was about systematically dismantling their lives and, honestly, their sanity. One of its main targets was the relationship between Betsy Bell and Joshua Gardner. Kate seemed to have a personal vendetta against their happiness. Whenever Joshua would visit, the entity's attacks on Betsy would intensify. Kate would curse and threaten Joshua, telling him he was not welcome in the house and that he would never marry Betsy. The torment was relentless and, well, deeply personal. If Betsy and Joshua tried to have a private conversation, Kate's voice would interject, mocking them and twisting their words. The spirit would even follow them if they tried to take a walk outside, whispering cruelties from the trees and bushes. It created this atmosphere of constant stress and surveillance. No moment was private, no thought was safe. For Betsy, it was a living hell. She was in love, but her happiness was being actively destroyed by a spiteful, invisible entity that seemed to take pleasure in her suffering. This psychological pressure eventually took its toll. Betsy Bell, worn down by the constant physical and emotional abuse, just couldn't take it anymore. She was exhausted and terrified. The joy of her engagement had been replaced by fear and dread. The spirit had won. In 1821, Betsy broke off her engagement to Joshua Gardner. The story goes that on the night she made her decision, the entity's voice was heard celebrating loudly, singing songs of victory throughout the house. It had achieved its goal. It had successfully manipulated human lives to satisfy its own dark desires. This event shows the chilling intelligence of the Bell Witch. This was not a mindless haunting, it was a calculated campaign by an entity with clear motives. It wanted to control the family, it wanted to dictate their choices. The breaking of Betsy's engagement was a major victory for Kate. It proved that her power extended beyond simple physical manifestations. She could influence human will. She could bend people to her desires through pure, unadulterated terror. The family was not just haunted, they were being held hostage by a supernatural tyrant. The prime target of the Bell Witch's hatred was always John Bell. From the very beginning, the spirit, Kate, made her intentions clear. She had come for him. She promised to torment him to his grave. As the years of the haunting wore on, John Bell's health began to fail dramatically. The strange facial affliction that caused his tongue to swell became more frequent and severe. He suffered from muscular spasms and seizures that would leave him weak and incapacitated for days. He was a strong man, a pioneer, but he was being worn down by an enemy he could not fight. During his fits, Kate's disembodied voice would fill the house with taunts and jeers. She would laugh at his pain. She would sing gleeful, mocking songs as he writhed in agony. The family and visitors who witnessed these episodes were horrified. They could hear the spirit's voice clearly, celebrating John Bell's suffering. She would often tell him, "I'm going to get you, old Jack. I'm not going to let you go." It was a slow, torturous process. The entity was not just waiting for him to die, it was actively causing his decline, savoring every moment of his pain. The end came in December of 1820. John Bell fell into a stupor and could not be roused. The family was deeply concerned. His son, John Jr., went to the medicine cupboard to get his father's medication. He found a strange, smoky-looking vial that no one recognized. The family became suspicious. They gave a drop of the mysterious liquid to the cat, which reportedly died almost instantly. At that moment, the voice of Kate boomed through the house. She proudly confessed that she had placed the poison in the cupboard and had given it to old Jack while he slept. John Bell died on December 20th, 1820. The entity's victory was complete, but its cruelty did not end with his death. During the funeral, as family and friends mourned at the graveside, they were shocked to hear loud, joyous singing. It was Kate's voice, celebrating the death of her enemy. She sang until the last shovelful of dirt was placed on the grave. It was the ultimate act of disrespect, a final, horrifying display of her power and malevolence. The Bell Witch had fulfilled her promise. She had killed John Bell. The legend of the Bell Witch grew so powerful that it attracted the attention of a man who would become President of the United States, General Andrew Jackson. Sometime before his presidency, Jackson, a known tough and fearless military man, heard the stories coming out of Adams, Tennessee. Intrigued and skeptical, he decided to investigate for himself. He gathered a group of his men, including a self-proclaimed witch tamer, and set out for the Bell Farm. Jackson was not a man to be trifled with. He was determined to expose what he believed was a local hoax. As Jackson and his entourage approached the Bell property, their wagon suddenly stopped dead in its tracks. The horses could not move it, no matter how hard they were whipped. It was as if they were pulling against an immovable wall. The men got out and tried to push the wagon, but it wouldn't budge. Andrew Jackson, frustrated and amazed, is reported to have exclaimed, "By the eternal boys, it is the witch!" Suddenly a sharp metallic voice echoed from the nearby woods, telling the general they could proceed and that she would see them again that night. Instantly the wagon was free and the horses moved on as if nothing had happened. That night Jackson and his men settled in at the Bell home ready for a confrontation. The witch tamer in his group boasted that he could handle any spirit. He had special spells and even a silver bullet in his pistol that he claimed would drive the entity away. As the man continued his boasting, he suddenly screamed and began thrashing around. He cried out that he was being stuck with pins and beaten by an unseen force. He was thrown around the room and eventually fled the house in terror, begging the general to let him leave. The witch had made her point. The rest of the night was chaos. The spirit, Kate, tormented Jackson's men relentlessly. It pulled their covers, slapped them, and filled the house with terrifying noises. By morning, a defeated Andrew Jackson and his men had had enough. They quickly packed their belongings and left the farm, never to return. Jackson would later state, "I would rather fight the entire British army than to deal with the Bell Witch." The fact that a man as powerful and fearless as Andrew Jackson was driven away adds an incredible layer of credibility to this chilling tale. The witch had defeated a future president. After the death of John Bell in 1820 and the breaking of Betsy's engagement in 1821, the entity's activity began to lessen. Kate announced that she was leaving the family but promised she would return in 7 years. For the Bell family, it must have been a period of immense relief, mixed with the dread of her promised return. They tried to piece their lives back together. They tried to forget the years of terror they had endured. The house grew quiet. The objects stayed in their places. The disembodied voice was gone, but the memory and the fear remained. True to her word, the spirit returned in 1828. She appeared at the home of Lucy Bell, John Bell's widow. The haunting started again, but it was reportedly different this time. The entity seemed less focused on torment and more on conversation. She would engage in long discussions with the family, particularly with John Bell Jr. Kate would prophesize about future events, including the American Civil War and the 2 World Wars, with startling accuracy. It was as if her mission of vengeance was complete, and now she was simply an observer, a voice from another world sharing its knowledge. This period of the haunting lasted for about 2 weeks. Then, the entity made another promise, or perhaps a final curse. Kate announced that she was leaving again, but this time she would return in 107 years. That would mean a return in the year 1935 to one of John Bell's direct descendants. She said her final goodbyes and her voice faded away, leaving the Bell family in peace for the last time. The idea of a haunting scheduled so far in the future is deeply unsettling. It suggests a consciousness that operates outside our understanding of time. Whether the spirit returned in 1935 is a matter of local legend and debate. Some descendants have reported strange occurrences, but nothing on the scale of the original haunting. The entity's final promise hangs over the history of the Bell family like a dark cloud. It's a chilling legacy, a curse passed down through generations. The story doesn't just end, it leaves a door open to the future. The Bell Witch might be gone, but her final words ensure that her legend and the fear she inspired will never truly die. She left behind an echo, a question mark that lingers to this day. Today, over 200 years later, the story of the Bell Witch is more than just a piece of folklore. It is embedded in the very fabric of Adams, Tennessee. The land itself seems to hold the energy of those terrifying years. Visitors from all over the world travel to this small town drawn by the chilling tale. They come to visit the recreation of the Bell Cabin and the mysterious Bell Witch Cave, a place where some believe the entity's spirit resided. The air here feels different. It's heavy. You feel like you're being watched. The story is alive here. The impact of the haunting on American paranormal history is immense. It is one of the very few cases where a death was officially attributed to a spirit. The sheer volume of witnesses, including respected community members and even a future president, sets it apart from other ghost stories. This wasn't just one person's claim, it was a community-wide phenomenon. This case has become the blueprint for countless horror movies and books, including films that have terrified audiences worldwide. The Bell Witch is the godmother of American hauntings. What was the entity that called itself Kate? Was it truly the vengeful spirit of Kate Batts? Was it a poltergeist, a demonic entity, or something else entirely? Something our modern science still cannot define. These questions remain unanswered. Skeptics have tried to explain it away as a hoax, perhaps perpetrated by one of the family members. But how could a simple hoax explain the range of phenomena, the disembodied voice that knew secrets, the physical strength to stop a wagon, and the ability to terrify a man like Andrew Jackson? The explanations fall short of the reality described by the witnesses. The legend of the Bell Witch serves as a chilling reminder that there are things in this world that we do not understand. It taps into our most primal fears, the fear of the dark, the fear of the unknown, and the fear of an unseen force that wishes us harm. The flickering candlelight in that 19th century farmhouse has been replaced by our modern electric lights, but the fear is the same. The story endures because it speaks to the darkness that lies just beyond the edges of our perception. The spirit of Kate may be silent now, but her terrifying story continues to whisper through the hills of Tennessee, a permanent echo in the paranormal world.